So thank you so much for your time and your participation. Local democracy is a huge part of our theology as well, so I'm so glad to see so many of you here today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over. We've got a few presentations we want to give to you or just to talk a little bit with you. This meeting was kind of the brainchild of our steering committee for our capital campaign that is still in a very kind of proto stage right now, but Kathleen McKenzie has very generously offered to chair this committee, and she's the one that's helping us to give some order to this chaos at this point. So I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen to give you some comments. I'm going to say a couple of words, and then Mark Dickens, our current board president, will then offer some information in terms of next steps and things of that nature. And at the end of that time, we'll offer an opportunity for hopefully a short question and answer session with the idea that probably we will take down every question you give, and we'll answer what we can today. What we can't answer, we will definitely get to you at the next town hall meeting that we will definitely have. I think Mark has some details as to when that's already scheduled. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Kathleen.
Thank you. You don't need to clap, that's okay. You can clap if you like what I say. So this congregation has a proud history and tradition. Founded as a Unitarian church in 1908 by Duncan Fletcher, who served as the mayor of Jacksonville and became the United States Senator from Florida. In 1960, Reverend Charles White McGee became the first settled minister. In 61, we became of the Unitarian Church. In 61, we became Unitarian Universalist. The congregation met in various places, for a while at the YMCA until asked to leave, because Reverend McGee talked about the Kinsey Report and human sexuality. Charles McGee became an active leader in the civil rights movement along with many members of the congregation. Rodney Hurst Sr., then a teenage member of the NAACP Youth Council, would later write a book about the efforts to integrate lunch counters in Jacksonville. The book was titled, "It Was Never About a Hot Dog and a Coke." In that book, he devotes a chapter to Charles McGee, writing, quote, "Few white ministers in Jacksonville, Florida supported the Youth Council, NAACP, and the sit-in movement in 1960. Reverend Charles White McGee did as the pastor of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Jacksonville." Charles would also later attend the final 2 days of the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, which also brought unwelcome attention from the KKK. And remember, he walked on crutches. A UU minister, James Reeb of Boston, was killed in that march. When George Wallace, and if you're too young to know who George Wallace was, go home and Google it, was scheduled to speak at the Civic Auditorium, Jean McGee, Charles's wife, participated in a demonstration of women dressed in white standing on the median of the road outside. KKK youth marched, all dressed in black, and their parents drove by with Confederate flags waving. The church ladies were spit upon. But Jean later wrote that her sign read, "Freedom and dignity shall stand in our doorways." She said she could hardly sleep that night. Charles preached, quote, "We have come to think that our survival depends on our ability to make war better than the next nation, rather than to erase the conditions that make for wars." And he further goes on to contrast the costs of the Vietnam War and the then proposed anti-ballistic missile system with domestic needs here in our own country: hunger, housing, and medical care. It was during Charles McGee's ministry that this church was built, 1965 to 66 when we moved in. 2 years ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of this church. This church was designed by Bob Broward, a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. Bob declared that this was his favorite building. It has been named the top 100 buildings in Florida. It is often visited by people from out of town interested in architecture and especially mid-century modern architecture. 2 weeks ago, the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation held their conference in Jacksonville. The building was visited by members on a tour who raved. They loved this building, they raved about it. And at that conference, a speaker, Chad Martin, from Partners for Sacred Places and the National Trust for Historic Preservation, talked about a $14 million national fund for sacred places. He came to the conference looking for a church in Florida to fund, up to $250,000. And they want to spend their money within the next 4 years. I hadn't heard of this, but April 17th was the deadline for this year's grant cycle. But I'm now working on the application for the National Register for Historic Places as a preliminary step to writing that grant application next year. They also provide training in raising funds, building management, and community engagement. 2 years ago, we presented the designs that you see on these boards, done by the architect Kathy Duncan, who had worked for Bob Broward, to show us what we could be as a church home. And we developed our campus renewal vision to preserve, revitalize, and expand our church home. That's it.
So a little bit of what I'll say will overlap just a little bit with what Kathleen just shared with us, but I think it's important to know how we got to this spot. Some of us have been through it from the beginning. Some of us might be a little new and may not be aware of how long this conversation has been going on. So at least 3 years ago, our congregation at that time began a serious conversation about the future of our church. Among the many things that was a part of that conversation was the creation of a Facebook group that was open to all of our members. It was called UUCJ Ideas. And in it, we discussed what we hoped to see our church become. We surveyed our members to discover what the most pressing needs and desires were. And we discussed the findings in a town hall meeting that August, so 3 years ago almost. And it revealed that a solid majority of our congregation in 2015 wanted us to remain in our current location and to grow our membership. And that same survey indicated that our congregants saw our most pressing needs as being a larger sanctuary, a remodeled social hall, improved bathrooms, and repairs to our south wing. So the clear direction of these findings inspired our congregational leadership at the time to consult with Kathy Duncan, an award-winning architect with years of experience in historic preservation and design. And perhaps even more important than all that, to us at least, Kathy is a direct disciple of our original architect, Bob Broward. Then in September of 2016, as Kathleen mentioned, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of this sanctuary, and it was a big event. Many former ministers and former congregants came back to help us celebrate, and it was there that Kathy revealed her vision of what this sanctuary and what this campus could become. Many of us have seen the renderings in the social hall. They are here before you again. Kathy's design, a fulfillment of Bob Broward's original vision for this church, represented a concrete expression of our congregation's desire to preserve, revitalize, and expand. And then just last year, in our priority survey, the one we took before the triennial, we saw that only 9% of UUCJers wanted to remain the same size. A whopping almost 75% explicitly said they wanted to see us grow. So all of that leads us up now here, 2018, 3 years after these original conversations started, which I think makes it pretty clear that we UUs are a patient and deliberative people. But obviously, as you can see by the calling of this meeting, many of us feel that the time for action is probably upon us. And I will be the first to admit that years ago, when I first started serving this congregation, I was one of the last UUCJers that would have ever suggested doubling down on this sanctuary, on this campus, in this location. So I am well acquainted with all of the very rational and very well-reasoned arguments why it would make tremendous sense for us to leave this place and plant ourselves anew somewhere else. Arguments like upkeep of this building is a huge drain of our resources, or this part of Arlington is no longer a good match for the core demographic that Unitarian Universalism appeals to. I'm not here this morning to argue against those statements per se, because those statements are absolutely unequivocally true. And if we were running a for-profit business that cared only about bottom lines, then yes, we absolutely should cut bait, abandon ship, and reestablish ourselves in a place where there are more people who are more like us. To be very explicit, we should rationally go to a part of town that is whiter, richer, better educated, to a part of town with less poverty, less crime, less issues to worry about. That would be easier. That would be more comfortable and more likely to lead to success if success is measured solely by dollar signs. But I'm a Unitarian Universalist precisely because I believe there are things in life more valuable than money, more valuable than comfort, more valuable than ease. And frankly, if we are only interested in dollars and members, we should drop the UU from our name and rebrand ourselves as Baptist. This is Jacksonville, not Boston. That would be the smartest business plan for growing a congregation in Jacksonville. But of course, the values at the core of our identity are more important than just those bare naked numbers. So the more that I consider the long-term future of this church, the more I personally believe that, yeah, I think we should stay in Arlington. We do some really good work here. Tree Hill, Arlington Heights Elementary, the Neighborhood Accountability Board that we host here at our very own campus. But my point isn't that Arlington needs us. Far from it. We need Arlington. Arlington has things to teach us, and the people here can teach us things that we frankly will never learn at the beaches or in Nocatee. And I live in Nocatee. We need to learn what it really means to be a good neighbor in a neighborhood full of people who don't look or sound like us. And if we can't figure out how to do that, then Unitarian Universalism is a lie. And we should stop pretending that this church is dedicated to being anything more than a social club that will white flight out of here at the first reasonable opportunity. As for this campus, these old buildings, they will drive you nuts, especially if you are on the Building and Grounds Committee. In spite of their beauty, tranquility, and historical significance, they need some attention. And that attention costs money and time. I have always been one of those people who believe that a church is not the building, it is the people. And I still, to this day, absolutely believe that UUCJ is not this sanctuary. But what I may have been convinced of over the years is that this sanctuary is like one of the people. Maybe like a revered elder who has served us faithfully for over 50 years. Our sanctuary was designed with love by, yes, a renowned architect, and that's super cool, but more importantly, that architect was one of our own members. This is a living piece of art intentionally designed to embody Unitarian Universalist values, such as our reverence for nature. This sanctuary was made for us, by us, and it is not something to be easily or lightly discarded. Our faith believes in recycling and reclamation. And as bad as this sanctuary and campus can be sometimes, as hard as it can be, I don't believe it's dead yet. I believe she has more to give us. So to paraphrase from one of my favorite TV shows that I used to watch reruns on all the time, back from the 60s, we can rebuild her. We have the technology. Better than she was before. Better, stronger, bigger. We, all of us, myself included, we are the caretakers of a religious community whose roots go back 120 years. And the decisions we make today are not solely for our own benefit. Our sacred responsibility is to pass on a better, stronger, more vibrant church to the next generation. Not our biological children necessarily, but our spiritual and religious descendants. Those who will carry the torch of UUism and UUCJ into the future. So as we discuss our future, we must consider and hear the voices of those who are not yet seated at the table. The reason that I'm willing today to go on the record in support of this capital campaign is because I believe with my whole heart that it actually is in the best interests of those who will come after us. And of course, I recognize that not everyone will agree. We're Unitarian Universalists. We never agree on anything. But as Francis David purportedly once said, we need not think alike to love alike. And so as we consider our future together, I do have great faith in our capacity to love each other through any disagreement. Thank you.
I saw something on Facebook. It said, scientifically, they've discovered that people with glasses are smarter. So I'm wearing glasses today. I don't think we said anything about the 3 streams of funding. You want me to mention that?
What is that? I can't find it.
I'll just give you a quick. People wonder, why are we giving money for this thing, and then 6 months later you're going to ask money for something else? We've got 3 basic major streams, everybody hear me, of funding for the church. One is our annual fundraiser. That's what keeps the doors open, pays the electric bill, and pays Philip and the rest of the folks here. That's our normal doing business money. Then we've got another stream, which is run by the foundation. That's long-term money. That's if a hurricane comes and knocks the building down, we've got the foundation to fall back on for a major expense or something going into the future. Long-term money, just like your savings. The foundation is our IRA. You don't touch it until you need it, and sometime in the future. And then you've got your midterm money. We're gonna call that the capital campaign. That's buildings, that's grounds, that's building a parking lot, putting better lighting up, not just the industrial stuff that we're making do with. So a capital campaign is not to pay the bills. Doesn't do that. Don't use any of that money for the bills. We use it to fix things that are big and to expand the church in the way that the congregants want us to do it. And you've told us that you want us to expand the church to a degree. And you can see on a given Sunday, there's a whole bunch of folks in here. There's also folks that you don't see downstairs that are attending the service from downstairs. And what we found is we're a little bit small for the congregation that we've already got. And we know we're going to get bigger. Jacksonville itself is getting bigger. And when people see this place, I happened to be here when that bus tour came a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday. I woke up early Saturday morning, Realized I was almost late to church. Got all ready, came to church. So I was here when the bus was here. It was weird that all these people were at church. Not that there's not as many as normal, and I didn't recognize them. So, but it was really neat to watch them all walking around with cameras and talking to each other and pointing things out. This is a special place, and we need to do what we can to take care of it, as he said, for the future generations. So what we're talking about is the capital campaign. It's going to be a large number, and it's going to be over an extended period of time. So it'll take us, we haven't chosen yet, but 3 or 5 years in that kind of a number. And it's going to be a big deal, and it's going to really improve our situation here. What I wanted to share with you is we want input, as we always do, and everybody's got an opinion, and we want to hear it. If you can take out your cell phones right now, I'm going to give you an email address. We decided to make it user-friendly, intuitive, and it's called the Capital Campaign, no, correction, not the, it's called Capital Campaign at uucj.org. So everybody can remember. It's a little bit long, but it's easier to remember instead of a bunch of letters. Capital Campaign. And if you've got input that you want to share and it's lengthy or it's detailed or specific issues that you don't get a chance to share today, or even if you do get a chance to share today, go ahead and send us an email. Every one of them will be read. And in about a month, we're going to have another town hall meeting, and we'll review the input that we've gotten from y'all and brief back to you what you said to us, what we think we heard you say. The date of the next the date of the next town hall meeting is 22 July. Right after church, just like this one was. We have a handout to describe the 3 streams, and I believe we have it in the office. If not, we'll shoot it out in a burst so you can, to help you understand the things that I was talking about.